You know, I've had a lot of people ask me, can I put modern componentry on a vintage steel frame? The answer is yeah, sometimes. There's some things you can't do. But yeah, let's go over that today. Now what we're gonna do in this video is we're gonna go over all the things you have to consider while choosing parts and choosing a frame to make sure that they're compatible. Now the first thing you have to consider when you're picking a frame is you have to pick something with at least 125 millimeter rear spacing. It's not that hard to figure out. Most bikes from the 80s onward were spaced 125. Before that, they were 120. That had a 5-speed cog. This one had a 6-speed originally, or maybe even a 7 at 125 millimeters. So make sure you don't go with the frame too old. You won't be able to respace it. Now for this particular group, you needed 130 millimeters. So what do you do about that? Well, you bend it. Yep. You cold set it. Should you do that? Some would say no. So is it illegal? No. Is it fattening? Maybe a little bit. I had asked Richard Schwinn at Waterford Cycles if that was a good idea. And what he would do is he would put the frame on the jig, and he did what I did. You'd spread the back end out, and then you would have to make the rear dropouts parallel again, because as you spread it, they go wide, and then you bend them parallel. Now, we're talking 5 millimeters here. It's not that great a difference. So I had success. I got my 11-speed cog to fit in without any hassles, without any problems. Now, when you look at vintage frames, tire clearance and brake reach is an issue. Make sure you get the one that's compatible for your riding style. If you're looking to put 28C tires on, or even 32, you gotta make sure you're picking the right frame. Now let's say you're doing a touring bike, and I saw Jeffrey Bach do this. He built a brand new frame, cool Randonauer bike, and he had semi-modern, like a 9-speed Campagnolo shifters, brifters, and a vintage mountain bike Campagnolo cantilever. And they actually work pretty well. So I can't say it's always going to be compatible, you know, a new shifter or newish shifter lever, brake lever, brifter, and a vintage brake. But if you're going to do a retro mod, I'm assuming you're going to want to go with the newer brakes as well. They stop better. This particular bike here has a really short reach, very short, and that's a 25C tire, and it's pretty tight. I can't put a 28 on here. Now, very important, make sure that when you pick a frame, you pick one that has recessed brake bolts. See the Allen head here sits flat? That's what you're looking for. Here's what it looks like when you don't have a recessed brake bolt. The problem with that is all modern brakes come with a recessed brake bolt, like I just showed you. Now, of course, when you're looking at a modern bike, you're looking at modern shifters or brifters. That's where you can shift from your handlebars. That's nothing new for you guys that are into cycling. However, if you're putting on a vintage bike, it does cause you to get an adapter. As you see with this bike, you have your brifters, and of course the cables come down, and then there needs to be a cable stop here. Now this one's pretty ugly. I said you need an adapter. That's really what I meant was a cable stop. If your bike has these braze-ons, you just have to remove the shifter, and there's an adapter you can put here that will stop the cable as well. The next thing, bottom bracket. Yeah, you gotta be careful. Make sure you get the correct bottom bracket. Pretty much all vintage frames have your standard threaded bottom bracket. It may come in 3 different threads, English, Italian, and French. So as long as you get the right threading on your bottom bracket, you'll be in great shape. This particular one has English threads, and I chose to use the external bottom bracket that goes with the Ultegra crank arms. Be sure that the modern crank that you decide to go with has a compatible bottom bracket available. Next thing I had to be concerned about was the stem and handlebar. Well, it's really no concern. It just depends if you want to go modern with that or not. Now, a lot of people just go with the standard threaded vintage headset. That's most common. I decided to stick with the more vintage bar and stem combination. I just don't like the way the new ones look. Let me give an example of that. On the left, you see a quill stem that goes into the steer tube. As you can see, it tapers and gets wider at the top. On the right, you see the actual stem that clamps onto it. I found an example here. Here's a vintage frame, vintage headset. It's got the quill stem and your A-head stem or threadless stem clamped on top of it. Therefore, you have the advantages of a modern handlebar stem and handlebar, where you could, change the stem, change the angle, do all that stuff without pulling the tape off the bars. The next thing you got to pay attention to is the front derailleur. Front derailleurs come with different clamp sizes. The typical vintage frame is a 1 1/8 inch clamp. Or you get a braze-on front derailleur, is what they call it, a braze-on, with an adapter with a 1 1/8 inch clamp as well. Another thing you need to look at is the axles. When you have a vintage frame, you can't use a through axle. You have to use something with a standard quick release. If you try to put a through axle on this, ain't gonna work. Here's an example of a through axle right here. Of course, the forks are different. They wrap all the way around. You have your bolt, if you will, or axle that goes through the axle. You tighten this up and it screws into the other side. You can't do that on a vintage frame. Now, seat and seat post should not be an issue. This particular one takes a 26.8 millimeter post. They do vary every 2/10 of a millimeter, believe it or not. The most common size is a 27.2, but make sure that you get yourself a proper seat post that fits specifically for your frame. Now make sure that the frame you choose has what's called a forged dropout. Most better frames have them. That's where you have your dropout here, and your derailleur hanger, which is this blue tab down here, is attached. It's one piece. You'll need that for your modern derailleur to bolt right to it. Also keep in mind, if you're going to go with a shift system that is electric, some require holes to be put into the frame to run the wires. Now there are some wireless systems that are available. I'm not sure if they'll work. I don't know enough about them, to be quite honest. But if you have to drill holes, stay away. Now, a couple more recommendations. Number one, don't put a modern group on a composite frame. They don't bend. And don't put it on an aluminum frame, especially like a Cannondale, something so stiff. You're never going to be able to space that properly. And if you bend those dropouts out and you jam that wheel in there and you clamp it tight, you're going to bend that axle over time. Not a good idea, and you're putting too much stress on the frame. Now, why in the world would someone want to put a modern group on a vintage frame? That's a great question. And I'll just tell you the truth. And some of you homies that are into, homies? Really? Am I that young? No, I'm not that young. Some of you guys are saying, hey, that's not the right thing to do. Don't take that Miata frame and trash it with those new parts. But let's be clear. New parts shift better. You have better gearing ratios. You have better brakes. Try doing a training ride with down tube shifters that are not indexed. You're losing time. And the reason I built this Miata was, hey, I want to build a steel bike with a frame I love and respect, that I love the ride, and I'm going to put parts on it that I could do a training ride with and keep up with my peeps. And I do on this bike. It's really efficient. It's very strong. It's very fast. And I'm out of the saddle. And when we get to the bottom of that hill, I could stop, quickly. Hey guys, let's do a recap. First, let's start at the dropouts. Make sure that they have 125 millimeter spacing or more. Second, make sure you get quick release hubs and axles versus the through axle. Make sure you get a forged dropout so you can clamp that rear derailleur on. Buy the proper frame that's going to give you the tire clearance you're going to need, then get applicable brakes. And make sure you get the recessed bolt if you get modern side pulls. Get the correct size seat post. It's crucial. Now make sure you get yourself an applicable headset, possibly vintage, along with your bar and stem combination. Decide if you want to go modern or not. Make sure you get a cable stop or the adapters. Also, make sure you get the correct bottom bracket, and make sure usually they're threaded, always threaded, and either English, Italian, or French threaded. Make sure you get a proper front derailleur and or an adapter if you're going to go with a braze-on. And that pretty much sums it up, guys. Hopefully that was helpful. Well, at the end of the day, what do you get? You get a bicycle made of steel, handles like steel, rolls like steel. I love this thing. And I get all the modern shifting and braking that you get out of a modern bike, but the look, the feel, and road feel of a vintage road bike. This is awesome. I love it. And for the purist, it's not for you. Because you look at that group and go, no, you ruined it. But guess what? It is what it is. Now that being said, if anyone here has a Team Miata with the original Dura-Ace components from 82 or 81, I think, right in that area, let me know, because I would be interested in that. But that one I'll keep stock. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching, especially those of you that watched all the way to the end. Now, if you're new to the channel, please check out my other videos where I do all kinds of things, review bikes, rebuild bikes, that kind of thing, which is a lot of fun. You're going to see something new this summer. I'm going to do a little bike tour, probably the Ohio and Erie Trail, maybe the Katy Trail, and do that on a vintage touring bike with vintage bags, the whole works. So I'm kind of excited about that. Now, if you have any questions about a specific frame and how you're trying to pair things up with new parts, just leave it in the comments section below, or you can email me. My email address is at the top of the page on YouTube. You should see it there, and I'll be able to answer your questions. You know, the channel's not so large where I can't be personal and answer all the questions and comments. I always try to do that. So thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. I always say that. I know it sounds like a pain in the butt, but please do that. It really helps with the algorithms. More people will see the videos. We'll just grow this community wide open. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next video.